Look at that.
What are you doing, John?
Milk, which I wanted, but didn't give it to me. Which I've never. Here's the toy cat.
I mean, yeah.
And Jordan here's me too. And he's gonna get every single one.
I couldn't wait for the day for us to come together. I never thought it was gonna happen. For a point in time, they had me so defeated.
Can I have one? Me too. I don't want one. This one died. This one or something. I guess.
Take one and go to the fridge.
I get special subtraction.
The X symbol means to multiply.
This is times. Well, 2 coins. But each year they can do. Yeah, it's 200. 200. What's it? No, they're not. Let's shake it.
He wants a hug. Hug.
I don't even think my kids should have been taken in the first place. And it happened so quickly, too.
Next thing you know, I just have a DCF worker at my door saying, I'm your caseworker now.
And then on top of it, they took everybody. You don't think it's going to happen to you until it does happen. And it's like, people think of DCF as, you know, either child kidnappers or they're the saviors, you know, they save children. But what were they really saving my children from? That's supposed to be their last option, is taking children. And it wasn't. That was their first option. Like, they didn't offer me any services. I was still doing everything that they wanted me to do: anger management, parenting class, counseling, substance evaluation, the parent psych evaluation. But it was just reasons for them to keep the kids from coming home. Like, oh, this is a concern. We're concerned about this. We're concerned about this. And it was little things, simple little things. And it's like, realistically, like, let's be real, like, this is why you're keeping my kids away. I eventually ended up losing my job because my depression and all the things that I had to do with DCF service plan.
Look, we're upsetting Booger. Now stop. Booger, don't do that. Nope, don't.
Simply just want my right.
And it's just hard not to get mad.
I look over my shoulder and everything, it's like DCF this or DCF that, you know, we got to have the house cleaned up, even though we got 6 people living here, but we need to have the house spotless because DCF's going to come in and take you away, you know. It's always that little voice in the back of my head that's like, DCF. Families that are involved with DCF is because of poverty. You're not going to get a whole bunch of parents that have cars and a house that are being targeted.
The predominant approach in child protection has been removal of children. Now, given the fact that the majority of cases that we see in our child regulatory system involve allegations of neglect as opposed to overt allegations of inflicted injury, what we would call abuse, issues of implicit bias, subjective discretion rear their ugly heads. It's assumed that because of an allegation of abuse and neglect, you're a family that's in need of fixing. It's the converse of presumption of innocence. There's no presumption of fitness.
When DCF comes into your home, they act as if they're there to help you, and they're really there to police you. The government comes in and takes the kid and presumes to have the right. The system presumes they have the right. Everything after that is hellish.
Every effort possible to keep 18, 19, and 20-year-olds in a supportive judicial
factors. It's important to note that many of the youth who are currently involved in the juvenile system are duly involved in both the Department of Child Welfare system as well as juvenile criminal justice. Juvenile courts have jurisdiction. If there's abuse and neglect, you have to or you should intervene. The question is, what is an appropriate and a proportional response? If the focus becomes to criminalize poor people, then you're feeding into this system which perpetuates a war on poor people.
What is wrong with us? That we just take kids out of a family for incredibly benign kinds of reasons. And then they have to fight to get their child back.
There's a really perverse process by which children can be removed from their parents in the name of treating them, and then are traumatized in our so-called system of care. This is analogous to a child welfare form of cruel and unusual punishment. It's not accidental, it's systemic.
There is a serious human rights crisis within Boston's disadvantaged communities. The parents are making every effort to reunify with their children, with DCF making it nearly impossible, legally kidnapping our children, tying our hands behind our backs, holding our children hostage, and using them as collaterals in their own agenda. All of this is the definition of systemic abuse. Do what I say, and maybe we will let you see your children again. This is not a way to live in constant fear, feeling helpless and hopeless in fragile homes, potentially in crisis, re-traumatizing families who have already been traumatized. This is generational trauma, and it is not helping our communities, it is hurting them. My experience and the traumas that I experienced being taken away from my mother and the way that it was handled by DCF traumatized me. It was one of the single most traumatizing events of my life. Since 12 years old, I had to teach myself how to do everything. DCF doesn't give you those independent living skills like they're supposed to. So as an adult, that's something that has followed me. DCF comes into your home and they rip your children away. This is a belief within our communities. This is what has happened for generations, and again, myself being a product of that.
The worst thing that you can possibly do is further disrupt the family system and tear it apart. Families often speak on one of the biggest challenges with healing from domestic violence is that they have to then heal from the department. When you take a child and remove them from the situation, it's completely understood that it's for safety concerns. However, it is also equally as traumatizing. It disrupts this family even more because now you're up against various systems. That is where we start to see so much of the behavioral challenges start to arise. Children becoming a little further in distance, wondering, should I go home? Will I ever have a home? Parents questioning, could I ever be a reasonable parent? Do I have the skills to be a parent? And when you throw a system in there that is saying, now we want you to meet all of these demands and requirements, and you have no idea when your children are going to be returned to you, families can become very discouraged and feel very harmed by the system.
Coming in with a glass half empty approach is not the right way to do it. We should be supporting these families, uplifting them, making them feel good about themselves so that they feel like they can accomplish their goals, so that they can be healthy, productive members of society, and to give back into their communities and to, make sure that they're instilling these great properties in their children. How can you be the best parent that you can be when you have systems, beating you down? I've been really in shock of how they handle families and the trauma that they have been causing. I'm fighting for my daughter. She's 17. And they're just now starting to do stuff with her to teach her how to be ready. If she was at home, I would have been doing this stuff to prepare her already. There were a lot of things that happened to her because of the lack of oversight with DCF, with the lack of them providing the appropriate services for her. My daughter missed 2 years of education under DCF's watch. Before DCF, she was on academic grade level. It wasn't a problem. Under DCF, she missed 2 years of school. So because I was giving them pushback on that, because I was asking and demanding to be involved in her treatment with her providers, because I was holding them accountable for what they were doing and what they weren't doing, now, oh, you can't see your daughter all of a sudden.
Hi, Shashai. Hi. You miss me? Yes.
Before there was a Department of Children and Family, it was Department of Social Services. So they're already familiar with that specific agency. And what does it mean? It means that I may never see my kids again. I may lose them. So they're already well guarded, feeling absolutely helpless because they're dealing with such a large system that has the power to say, you can or you cannot be a parent. We will terminate these rights. It's terrifying.
What makes something traumatic versus tragic? What makes something traumatic versus just something bad that happened? It's that sense of helplessness and powerlessness. It's that sense of the world not being a safe place, and that every order I thought there was in the world no longer exists.
Not only do you have to navigate being poor, not only do you might have to navigate being unhealthy, you then also have to navigate a power structure that wants to keep you in trauma and wants to keep you unhealthy and wants to keep you oppressed. These families who are already, again, in vulnerable positions, placed within systems that, again, that weren't necessarily designed for their best interest, that weren't necessarily designed with their cultural considerations in mind. And then you're saying, trust me, you know?
Are you going to get a worker that is responsive, or are you going to get a worker that is ultimately, again, dictating another level of coercion, power, and control?
If we can keep young people and children at home with their natural parents, we give them an opportunity to stay connected to their roots and to who they are, right? Because once you dislodge that, once you disrupt that and change that, the possibility of that child going left, going right, and having any other, types of problems and complications gets that much more likely.
The issues was with my daughter and her behavioral challenges. It wasn't about me being a mom and my lack of ability to care for my child. It wasn't about that. She needs placement that I can't afford. And the only way for her to get that service is through DCF.
Down and up. Down and up. These systems are so abusive. Like, you are selling my kid. Like, to me, that's like selling my kids. Like, it's the same thing when I had to sign the stipulation. It's like I'm selling my kid to you. Like, I'm giving my kid away to you. Like, I'm selling my soul. Like, that's what it feels like. That's why I was so upset.
I came to DCF to get help. You're always scared because even when you do things right, you're still somehow wrong. And it's not fair as a parent because you came in for services trying to get help. And now it's like your child is being ripped away, legally kidnapped from you. And that as a parent is just, I don't know how you sit with that. How do you sit with that? Because how do you get your child back?
Way, way back, there was dramatic underreporting of abuse and neglect. Then the pendulum shifted dramatically with mandatory reporting. Persons who are screening these reports, social workers, for example, if they don't have cultural humility, cultural competence, a lot of assumptions and judgments could be made.
How can you expect these people to be held accountable when they're just trying to chase after the paperwork? They don't even have a chance to think about the kid. DCF makes decisions. They don't involve the parent, and they don't involve the collateral agencies that have the strong alliance with the family.
DCF is a bureaucracy. It's a department People within DCF, their first job is to represent the bureaucracy. They don't represent kids.
It's very, very easy to demonize, to focus on the Massachusetts Department of Children and Families. They play a role, but they're part of a system. Dramatic reform is needed, and reform involves looking at more upstream interventions, a much more robust public health orientation. If we're going to intervene, we first think about supporting families and children in their community.
How do we break the cycles without having to disrupt the entire family system? How do we support children? And this is when we look at the child welfare system and go, how come you all do not reach out further to agencies like us? Stonehouse is very lucky because we have the opportunity to collaborate with parents that are referred to us through the Department of Children and Family. But once they are referred to us, we make it very clear, though, that they are the client of Stonehouse. Do you decide how you want our relationship to reflect with the department? You have choice in this process. The child welfare system has a great way of identifying the community-based organizations that provide services. They need to partner with these community organizations and also see them as experts.
All these families are already in vulnerable positions. They're already dealing with enough trauma. They're already dealing with enough, period. And to have somebody on that other side of that door who looks like you or at least can hear you, speaks your language, understands you, all those things, that matters. One less barrier, one less obstacle can be everything.
So a lot of my role specifically was supporting the families and the caregivers, connecting them to resources that are in the community. The best way for me to be effective as a service provider is to relate to them on a way that only someone who's been through it can relate to them. And let's talk about your strengths, because they're so used to systems, including DCF, only focusing on the negatives.
One of the things we love to try to do here at CSR is to help others, train others to train others, lead others so that they can lead others, really trying to break the chains and the cycles of poverty, break the chains and the cycles of trauma by allowing those who are already empowered to empower others, creating the space for them to feel as though that they can do that for their neighbors and their community residents that are going through similar challenges. If we invest in the community, if we invest in each other, it makes the entire lives of the entire community better, right?
How do we apologize for the fact that abuse has been experienced, but we can move forward as a family? Is it going to be complicated? Absolutely. Is it going to be tough? Absolutely. But is there resiliency in this family? Is there strength in this family? Is there skills that only this family possesses that nobody else does, and these little people help inspire also the parent to keep going? Instead of just the referral process, meet us in the middle with saying, you know what, we need to collaborate with you. What are the actual services and what would be a good fit for this family?
To me, the fastest, the most complete, and the most ethical way in which we change the system is by getting more families who are affected by the system involved in changing it. There isn't a savior mentality here. This is about doing it together.
Do you want to clap your hands if you're happy? If you're happy and you know it, clap your hands. If you're happy and you know it, clap your hands. If you're happy and you know it and you really want to show it, if you're happy and you know it, clap your hands. Okay. If you're happy and you know it, shout hooray.
Okay, what's next?